Episode 1. Descenso.
In the 70s, Pablo Escobar was just a mid-level smuggler controlling the flow of illegal goods like TVs and cigars in Medellin. His fate changed drastically when he met Mateo Moreno, alias Cockroach, a magic powder cook who fled to Colombia after surviving a military massacre in Chile. Cockroach brought a secret recipe and needed someone who knew how to smuggle. He offered a partnership to sell in the local market, but Pablo's business instincts immediately kicked in. He realized, why settle for loose change here when they could sell to Miami, United States, for multiple times the price? Their first operation started by slipping 60 kilograms of product into car tires, which was an instant success, yielding a $540,000 profit. Seeing the massive cash flow, Pablo went crazy scaling up the business. His smuggling tactics were mind-blowing. From hiding it in custom suits, slipping it under shoe soles, and stashing it in potato trucks, to forcing mules to swallow dozens of packets into their stomachs. The peak was when Pablo recruited Carlos Leder, who boldly used airplanes to transport 1,300 kilograms of product in a single trip. In the blink of an eye, money flooded Colombia. Other cartel bosses lined up to join, and Pablo effortlessly set his tax, 35% of their total sales.
Naturally, the product flooding America made the authorities there take notice. The DEA was thrilled when they managed to confiscate 60 kilograms of Pablo's stash, but Pablo just sat back and laughed. That seizure was purely a decoy to distract the police, while at the exact same time, his men were busy moving 600 kilograms through another route. Unfortunately, the threat from the inside was far more terrifying. One day, a Colombian police colonel seized hundreds of kilos from Pablo's trucks and extorted him because he knew exactly what the profit margins were. Sensing a leak from the inside, Pablo bribed the colonel $1 million just for one question: who is the traitor? Turns out, the rat was Cockroach, his very first partner, who was secretly stealing product to sell himself. Without any drama, Cockroach and his entire crew were executed that very day. In Pablo's dictionary, there was no mercy for traitors.
Because of this insane business, the city of Miami turned into a bloody war zone. Many civilians became victims, including a pregnant mule whose stomach ruptured after swallowing Pablo's packets. This incident was witnessed directly by the wife of a DEA agent named Steve Murphy. The United States government, which had previously turned a blind eye, was finally infuriated, especially seeing billions of their country's dollars sucked dry into the pockets of Colombian cartel bosses. At this point, America beat the drums of war and assigned Agent Murphy to Colombia to hunt down the kingpin. Meanwhile, back in Colombia, Pablo started getting headaches because he was faced with a brand new problem. The cash coming in from America was so massive that no bank dared to hold it anymore.
Episode 2. The Sword of Simón Bolívar.
Billions of dollars had already lined his pockets, but now Pablo's cash problem had crossed the line. There was so much of it that Colombian banks ran out of space and no longer dared to hold his cartel money. The solution? That cash was buried in the ground, stuffed inside the walls of houses, to the point where he just accepted that millions of dollars would be eaten by rats every single year. But for Pablo Escobar, money alone wasn't enough. He needed the one thing money couldn't buy: absolute power. He wanted to be the president of Colombia. Pablo played it smart. To gain the sympathy and support of millions, he activated his Robin Hood mode. A chunk of his dirty money was used to build clinics, schools, soccer fields, and even inaugurate a free housing neighborhood for the poor, aptly named Barrio Pablo Escobar. In the eyes of the elites and the government, he was a filthy criminal. But to the poor people of Medellin, Pablo was a savior. This massive grassroots support became his ultimate weapon. Using his connections and expensive lawyers, Pablo won the election and secured an alternate seat in the Colombian Congress. The kingpin's political career had officially begun. Right when Pablo was enjoying his political games, a threat emerged from the deep jungle. A radical communist guerrilla group named M19, who had just stolen the historical sword of the liberation hero Simón Bolívar, was in desperate need of revolution funds.
They ended up pulling the most foolish maneuver in the history of Colombia's underworld. They kidnapped Marta Ochoa, the younger sister of the Ochoa brothers, who happened to be Pablo's main business partners. M19 demanded a multi-million-dollar ransom, thinking the cartel bosses would panic and immediately pay up.
They were dead wrong. M19's actions simply awakened a sleeping dragon. Pablo immediately gathered all the top-tier cartel bosses in one room. In this historic moment, they agreed to form a private military organization called MAS, Muerte a Secuestradores, which translates to Death to Kidnappers. Instead of paying the ransom, each cartel boss chipped in to build their own mercenary army. The result? A mass slaughter. Every M19 member was hunted down relentlessly, tortured, and their bodies were hung from trees along the roadside. The M19 guerrillas were psychologically destroyed, terrified out of their minds, and finally surrendered, releasing Marta without getting a single penny in ransom. They were so subdued that the M19 leader even handed over Simon Bolivar's sword directly to Pablo. At this point, Pablo was no longer just a drug lord. He had transformed into a warlord.
Meanwhile, Agent Steve Murphy had just landed in Colombia to team up with a badass local DEA agent, Javier Peña. Murphy thought his status as an American law enforcement officer would make the cartel hesitate. The reality? Barely taking his first breath in his new home, Murphy was given a bloody welcome. His wife's pet cat was killed and hung inside their own apartment. The cartel's message was crystal clear. Once you meddle in our business, your life is on the line. Now, Pablo felt untouchable. He had unlimited money, a cold-blooded private army, and a position in the government. No one dared to touch the king. But Pablo forgot that in the world of politics and government, the deadliest enemies are the ones wearing meat suits, not the ones carrying firearms.
Episode 3. The Men of Always. Pablo Escobar is now sitting comfortably in the Colombian Congress, wearing a sharp suit and rubbing shoulders with the country's elites. He thinks with his endless supply of cash, he can buy the entire nation. But his political ambition hits a massive, impenetrable wall. The Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. Lara is a pure idealist who is sick to his stomach seeing dirty cartel money contaminate Colombian politics. Pablo tries to bribe him with an insane amount of cash, but Lara rejects it outright. This refusal pisses Pablo off, but Lara stands his ground without an ounce of fear.
Meanwhile, agents Murphy and Peña aren't just sitting around. They know they can't touch Pablo through normal legal channels as long as he has political immunity. They need concrete proof to destroy his squeaky clean Robin Hood image. Through Peña's network of shady informants, they realize there was one loophole and one piece of evidence Pablo forgot to erase: his old mugshot from his early days as a petty smuggler. The exact same photo taken when he was arrested by the police colonel years ago.
Murphy and Peña dig through piles of dusty police archives and finally hit the jackpot: Pablo Escobar's original mugshot. Without wasting a second, this fatal piece of evidence is handed straight to Minister Lara. In a highly tense Congress session, Lara boldly drops the bomb. He publicly exposes Pablo's criminal past in front of all the politicians and the national media, flashing the mugshot as undeniable proof. Pablo's facade as a hero of the people shatters in an instant. Utterly humiliated and stripped of his immunity, Pablo is officially kicked out of Congress. His dream of becoming the president of Colombia dies that very day.
But publicly humiliating Pablo Escobar is a fatal mistake. Stripped of his political suit, Pablo reverts back to his true form: cold-blooded cartel boss. He immediately issues an execution order. On his way home, Minister Lara Bonilla's car is ambushed by motorcycle hitmen, sicarios. Lara is brutally assassinated inside his own vehicle. The death of the Minister of Justice shakes the entire nation to its core. The enraged Colombian government finally agrees to the one thing Pablo fears more than anything else in his life: the extradition treaty to the United States. The real war has just begun.
Episode 4. The Palace in Flames. Following the brutal assassination of Minister Lara Bonilla, the cartel boss's worst nightmare finally becomes reality. The Colombian government officially approves extradition. Terrified of being sent to an American prison, Pablo and his cronies are forced to flee to Panama. There, they live like kings, protected by the local military. But Pablo feels like a bird in a gilded cage. He misses his kingdom in Colombia. Out of sheer frustration, Pablo makes an absolutely insane proposal to the government. He offers to pay off Colombia's entire national debt, amounting to billions of dollars, out of his own pocket, in exchange for canceling his extradition. Naturally, the president rejects the offer completely.
Meanwhile, back in Colombia, the tension is boiling. Agents Murphy and Peña are relentlessly tracking the cartel. Peña has to swallow a bitter pill when his key informant, a high-class escort named Helena, is caught by Pablo's ruthless ally, Gotcha. She is brutally tortured, proving that the cartel will go to sickening lengths to protect their empire and shut down the DEA's moves. Realizing his money can no longer buy the nation's law, Pablo opts for the most radical path imaginable: open terrorism. He knows that as long as the legal evidence against him sits inside the Colombian Supreme Court, he will never be safe. Armed with endless cash, Pablo funds his former enemies, the extremist M19 guerrillas. The mission is clear: storm the Palace of Justice in Bogotá, take the Supreme Magistrates hostage, and burn every single extradition document to ashes.
The assault triggers one of the bloodiest days in Colombian history. The military fiercely refuses to negotiate. They respond by rolling heavy combat tanks right through the courthouse doors. A brutal firefight ensues. The Palace of Justice is consumed by raging flames, and dozens are killed, including the innocent Supreme Court justices. Amidst the weeping of a nation that just lost its highest lawmakers, Pablo Escobar simply sits back, smiling with satisfaction from afar. All of his extradition files are completely incinerated. The kingpin has just scored a massive, devastating victory against his own country.
Episode 5. There will be a future.
Following the bloody incident at the Palace of Justice, Pablo Escobar becomes even more emboldened and brutal, refocusing his goals on two things: clearing his name before the law and eliminating anyone who supports extradition. This time, his main target is the highly anti-cartel presidential candidate, who bravely speaks out against him, Luis Carlos Galán. Galán is the greatest threat to Pablo's freedom. If he is elected, Pablo knows his days are numbered.
Pablo refuses to take any chances. During an open campaign rally attended by thousands of his supporters, Pablo's hitmen, sicarios, execute a vicious plan. Galán is brutally gunned down right on stage. Galán's assassination doesn't just shock the entire nation. It proves that Pablo Escobar believes he possesses a power greater than God. He can end the life of anyone who stands in his way.
This murder triggers an unstoppable wave of fury. Cesar Gaviria, who initially worked behind the scenes as Galán's campaign manager, is pressured to step up and take his place. Gaviria, who is understandably reluctant to become a target, ultimately accepts the challenge to continue Galán's fight against the cartel's terror. Meanwhile, on the law enforcement side, Agents Murphy and Peña realize they must take extreme measures. They team up with Colonel Carrillo, the leader of the elite Colombian police unit, Search Block, who is known to be just as ruthless as the cartels. Carrillo is the kind of law enforcement officer who couldn't care less about protocols or human rights. His only concern is hunting down Pablo's men using brutal methods, including torturing sicarios to extract information. Carrillo and the DEA team begin hunting Pablo's inner circle, attempting to slowly choke the drug empire, all while bracing for a retaliation from Pablo Escobar that is guaranteed to be far more terrifying.
Episode 6. Explosivos. The assassination of Luis Carlos Galán forces Cesar Gaviria to step up as the new presidential candidate. Gaviria has one campaign promise that makes Pablo Escobar feel truly threatened. He fully supports extradition. Realizing his freedom is hanging by a thread, Pablo decides to eliminate Gaviria, using the most insane and unimaginable method yet. He isn't using motorcycle hitmen or street shootouts anymore.
This time, the target is a commercial airliner, Avianca Flight 203, the exact flight Gaviria is scheduled to board.
The way Pablo executes this plan is purely demonic. He doesn't send a professional assassin to carry the bomb into the cabin. Instead, Pablo's men recruit a poor, young, and incredibly naive kid. This boy is completely deceived. He's given a briefcase to carry onto the plane, with the promise of a massive payout. They tell him the briefcase only contains a voice recording device. His only job is to flip a switch once the plane is in the air, supposedly to secretly record Gaviria's conversations. The innocent kid agrees, smiling at the thought of his payout, completely unaware that the switch he is about to flip is the trigger for a deadly bomb.
At the exact same time, agents Murphy, Pena, and the Colombian police are in a desperate race against the clock. Through wiretaps and informants on the ground, authorities catch wind of a massive threat against Gaviria's life. Moving with lightning speed and sharp instincts, security agents and Murphy manage to intercept the presidential candidate at the airport right before he steps onto the aircraft. Gaviria is pulled from his flight, but tragically, the chaos at the airport means that no one realizes the bomb has already made its way into the cabin, along with the naive young man.
Avianca Flight 203 finally takes off, carrying 107 civilian passengers who are completely oblivious to the danger. High up in the air, the young man calmly flips the recorder switch exactly as he was instructed. In a fraction of a second, the commercial airliner violently explodes midair, shattering into pieces miles above the ground. 107 innocent lives are wiped out in a massive fireball. Pablo Escobar might have failed to kill Gaviria that day, but this explosion changes everything. He is no longer just a drug mafia boss. In the eyes of the Colombian government, the United States, and the entire international community, Pablo Escobar has officially crossed the line and is now branded a cold-blooded terrorist. Agent Pena holds a deep personal vendetta against Gacha, as this was the very cartel boss who brutally tortured his favorite informant. Through grueling intelligence work, wiretaps, and a bit of luck, the Colombian police finally find a fatal loophole. They manage to track Gacha's location through the movements of his son, Freddy. Knowing the cartel boss is hiding out in a luxurious coastal property, Carrillo doesn't waste a single second. He immediately deploys ground troops and heavily armed combat helicopters for a massive raid. A chaotic, all-out firefight erupts. Feeling cornered, Gacha and his son attempt a desperate escape, busting through the barricades in a pickup truck. But this time, they can't outrun their fate. Carrillo's forces aren't just hunting them on the ground, they are hunting them from the sky. The police combat helicopter flies in low, chasing the truck while raining down a storm of bullets. Freddy is gunned down first. Gacha, heavily wounded and trapped on a dirt road with nowhere left to hide, is finally executed with a fatal shot from above. The death of one of Colombia's most vicious monsters serves as a massive victory for the DEA and a devastating blow to Pablo's empire.
Episode 7. You Will Cry Tears of Blood. After Colombia is rocked by the commercial plane bombing and a series of street violence, Pablo Escobar realizes that an all-out open war with the military is starting to drain his resources. He needs a new strategy, one that is more cunning, much quieter, yet mentally far more devastating. Pablo officially launches the greatest psychological terror campaign in Colombia, the mass kidnapping of the elites. This time, Pablo's targets aren't the police or soldiers. They are high-profile journalists, television personalities, and the family members of Colombia's most influential politicians. One of his biggest catches is Diana Turbay, a top journalist and the daughter of a former Colombian president. These VVIP hostages are locked away in secret locations scattered across the country. Through this tactic, Pablo sends a crystal-clear message to the presidential palace: stop the hunt, cancel the extradition law to America, or the lives of these elites will be taken one by one. This filthy tactic completely destroys President Cesar Gaviria from the inside out. Gaviria is trapped in an agonizing dilemma. On one hand, he refuses to bow down to terrorists and wants to relentlessly hunt the cartel. But on the other hand,
The families of the hostages, who are his own political supporters and elites, are constantly pressuring and crying, begging Gaviria to negotiate and save their loved ones. The entire nation is literally being held hostage by one man.
Amidst this political despair, Agents Murphy and Pena are racking their brains. They don't care about political negotiations. Their only job is to find the locations of the hostages before it's too late. However, finding hostages in a country where the majority of the population is paid by Pablo to keep their mouth shut is like finding a needle in a haystack. Escobar proves that he doesn't need to fire countless bullets to bring an entire country to its knees. He only needs to hold their most loved ones captive, making the Colombian government cry tears of blood.
Episode 8, La Gran Mentira. The death of journalist Diana Turbay during a completely botched search block rescue operation serves as a devastating blow that finally breaks Colombia's defenses. The public is furious, and President Gaviria runs out of options. Haunted by guilt and immense pressure from all sides, Gaviria swallows his pride and gives in to the most insane demand in criminal history. He agrees to abolish the extradition law to the United States.
This news, of course, infuriates Agents Murphy and Pena. All the blood, sweat, and lives lost hunting Pablo feel completely thrown away. The agreement signed between the government and the drug lord is nothing more than a massive joke. Pablo agrees to go to prison, but with absurd conditions. He will build the prison himself, La Catedral. The guards will be his own men. The police are forbidden to come near it, and he will only plead guilty to one minor trafficking charge. Pablo Escobar has just forced an entire nation to its knees to play by his rules.
However, just as Pablo prepares to enjoy his ultimate victory, a threat emerges from within his own ranks. Before going to prison, Pablo demands that all cartel branches pay a war tax of $200,000 a month. His cousin and the cartel's business mastermind, Gustavo Gaviria, warns him that a tax that high will inevitably trigger betrayal. Gustavo's instincts are spot on. The Cali cartel, led by Pacho Herrera, sees Pablo's surrender as a glaring weakness. Even worse, the Ochoa brothers, Pablo's strongest allies, secretly stab him in the back. To secure their own safety from extradition, they surrender to the government and trade their freedom for one deadly piece of information: the exact location of Gustavo's hideout. Using Marina Ochoa, whom Gustavo frequently dated, as bait, the search block successfully ambushes Pablo's right-hand man. In the interrogation room, Gustavo is brutally tortured by the Colombian police to give up Pablo's location. But up until his very last breath, Gustavo refuses to betray his brother. He ultimately dies at the hands of the search block.
Losing Gustavo completely shatters Pablo's heart, especially since he cannot even attend the funeral because he is still a fugitive. Fueled by deep vengeance, Pablo immediately dispatches his hitmen to Cali to hunt down Pacho Herrera. On the exact same day Gustavo is buried, the extradition law is officially revoked. Pablo is finally escorted by government representatives into La Catedral.
On national television, President Gaviria proudly announces that Pablo Escobar has surrendered and yielded to the law. But for Murphy and Pena, who watch in absolute disgust from a distance, they know the real truth. Pablo isn't being imprisoned. He has just been granted VVIP protection by the very country he destroyed. Episode 9, La Catedral. Officially, Pablo Escobar has finally been imprisoned. But in reality, La Catedral is not a penitentiary. It's a concrete 5-star hotel built by Pablo himself in the hills of Medellin. Inside, there are no cramped cells. Instead, there's a full-sized soccer field, pool tables, liquor, and endless partying. The guards? They are simply Pablo's hitmen wearing different uniforms. And the craziest part of all, the Colombian government and police are strictly forbidden from coming anywhere near the prison. From behind these luxurious walls, Pablo's drug empire actually grows wilder and richer. However, this false peace begins to crack from the inside. Believing his business needs to push harder,
Pablo hikes the war tax for all his cartel associates from $200,000 to a staggering $1 million. This policy causes two of his main associates, Fernando and Kiko Moncada, to secretly complain and plan to stash some of the profits for themselves. Whispers about millions of dollars secretly buried by Fernando and Kiko eventually reach Pablo's ears. Pablo summons the two men to visit him at La Catedral. Initially, they embrace, and Pablo seemingly accepts their excuses that they had absolutely no intention of betrayal. Relieved, Fernando and Kiko prepare to head home. But right at that moment, Pablo's mask comes off. Without a shred of mercy, Pablo and his men brutally execute Fernando and Kiko right inside the prison facility, unceremoniously disposing of their bodies.
News of Fernando and Kiko's disappearance leaks to the rival Cali cartel, who instantly sees this as a golden opportunity to destroy Pablo. Through a Cali cartel henchman named Navigante, they leak the secret of the murders inside La Catedral straight to the DEA. For agents Murphy and Pena, this is the exact weapon they've been searching for. Knowing they lack the legal authority to act, Murphy and Pena take the massive risk of getting fired by leaking the evidence of the murders directly to the media.
The news that Pablo Escobar is running execution squads inside a state prison explodes and goes viral across Colombia. The public is outraged. President Gaviria, once again utterly humiliated because his peace treaty was nothing but a sham, now has no other choice. He must take decisive action. And his first step is sending troops to immediately transfer Pablo out of La Catedral and into a real maximum security prison in Bogota. Episode 10, Despegue. The Colombian government finally runs out of patience and makes its move. President Gaviria sends the military to surround La Catedral under the guise that the prison needs renovations. In reality, the true intention is to transfer Pablo to a real maximum security military prison in Bogota. Realizing full well that stepping out of his fortress means either extradition or death, Pablo fiercely refuses to leave. He orders his men to arm themselves. Military barricades are formed outside the gates, and the tension reaches a boiling point. Hoping this standoff can be resolved without another humiliating bloodbath, Gaviria sends Vice Minister of Justice Eduardo into the lion's den to negotiate peacefully. But Pablo is already deeply paranoid and furious. He knows Eduardo is there not just to move him, but to investigate the murders of Kiko and Fernando. Instead of negotiating, Pablo detains Eduardo and takes him hostage. He forces the vice minister to call the president and demand the troops retreat. However, Gaviria, utterly sick of watching his country being held hostage by a terrorist, refuses to cave. He ignores the threat, hangs up the phone, and issues the definitive order everyone has been waiting for: raid La Catedral. At the exact same time, Agent Murphy is dealing with a massive crisis of his own. He is suddenly kidnapped, not by Pablo Sicarios, but by the Cali cartel boss, Pacho Herrera. Pacho holds a trump card. He has evidence of Murphy's involvement in the death of an innocent civilian during a previous operation. Pacho blackmails the DEA agent. To save his career and take down their mutual enemy, Pablo Escobar, Murphy is forced to swallow his pride and agree to a dirty alliance with the rival cartel.
Back at La Cathedral, the Colombian Special Forces finally storm the compound. A brutally intense firefight breaks out through the hallways of the luxurious prison. The government troops manage to take down the cartel guards one by one and successfully rescue Eduardo before he can be executed. But as the gunsmoke begins to clear and they breach the main block, the drug lord is nowhere to be found. Pablo Escobar, along with his most loyal men, has vanished into the dark Colombian jungle, escaping through a secret underground tunnel he had prepared since the day the prison was built.
This escape marks the absolute end of negotiations. As Pablo walks out of the tunnel, the first season concludes with a crystal clear message for the Colombian government. There will be no more courtrooms and no more political compromises. From this second forward, it is a pure manhunt, a war of extermination until one of them is dead.